Good morning, Denver. Ready for another fantastic day of budget hearings? Yay! Yay! Oh, let the games begin. Grab your bingo card and get ready. What's coming first is transportation and infrastructure, chaired by Chris Herndon. This is going to include the RTD budget we were yelling about the other night.
Do not see Councilmember Hines. Do not see Councilwoman Zeta Baca. So that would be me, Chris Herndon, District 8.
Good morning, Joel Clark, District 7.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Paul Cashman, South Denver, District 6.
Good morning, Amanda Sawyer, District 5.
Good morning, Kendra Black, District 4, Southeast Denver.
I like how she tried to smile instead of smirk. Someone's paying attention.
Councilwoman Torres. Kevin Flynn, Southwest Denver, District 2.
No tie for Flynn. What's going on?
Chris Hines, Denver's Perfect 10.
And I see Councilwoman Sandoval is connecting the audio, so I will give her a brief moment if she wants to introduce herself while she connects. And I don't believe we have any other council. And here comes Councilwoman Zeta Baca. Feel free to introduce yourself.
Good morning, Candy Vaca, District 9.
Wonderful. And I still see Amanda Sandoval is connecting to her audio.
Yeah.
Right, we have several presenters today. Colleagues, we have about a 78-page slide deck. My ask is that Public Works at a max do an hour and 15 minutes at a max. Don't have to take that. So we have 45 minutes for Q&A. So I'm not sure who, Euless, did you want to start off with comments? And Mayor Hancock will be in just a little bit late as he's finishing up another meeting. So Euless, if you want to give intro comments, and then we'll have whomever is going to be the first presenter. Take it away, Euless.
Sure. Thank you very much, and good morning, Councilman Herndon and the other council members. For the record, I'm Euless Cleckley, Executive Director of the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure. And on behalf of the almost 1,300 employees that we have in our department, we're pleased to present to you today our budget for the fiscal year 2021. Even though we're experiencing some unique circumstances, we do feel that this budget will put us in a position to meet our overall mission as a department, and which we're really here to make sure that we are providing efficient, high quality services, safe and equitable public infrastructure and programs for the people that live in the city and county of Denver. So thank you for your support during this time. It's been a challenging time for us, but we truly feel that what we're about to present to you today will provide us the best posture to move forward with our vision and mission for the department. So today you'll hear from me and other members of our leadership team. We have Seth Runkle, who is our Chief Financial Officer for the department. You'll hear from our Deputy Manager of Operations, Todd Richardson. You'll also hear from our Deputy Manager over Utilities, who is Margaret Medellin. You'll also hear from our Deputy Manager and City Engineer, Leslie Thomas, who is over our Project Delivery Administration. So we have the core leadership team here, and we also have on the line a variety of different leaders throughout the divisions in the department that can provide some answers on specific questions. And so, Seth, I believe you're running the slide deck.
Somebody's got to be running the clown show. You need help. Y'all need help.
Thank you, Seth. So next slide, Seth.
Somebody come help with the slide deck. Over. Bless your buttons.
So we can now see the org chart is now up on my screen, Euless.
Okay. All right. Very good. So just a level set. Officially, we were recognized as the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure beginning in January of 2020. This came on the heels of the City and County voters approving a charter change to actually establish this new department. And so the last time we presented our budget last year, we showed you a version of our organizational chart. The functional areas of our organization have not changed, but there's one slight adjustment that we have made, and I'll just point that out. We are divided up into 3 different administrations. Our project delivery administration.
You're from
which has
Tennessee too.
the
That makes me so happy. I love us.
Design and transportation, as well as transportation project management.
Where are you from in Tennessee? I'm from
management.
Difficult.
A pause.
Yeah, I know, right? It's actually the name. That's the actual name. No, you've never heard of it. There's a reason. Our closest hamlet is Carthage or Lebanon.
So we did.
We're halfway between Lebanon and Cookville.
Make a adjustment to really have our staff
kind of
on,
still about 90 minutes off of I-40.
Building and constructing and implementing transportation specific projects through our project transportation.
I just like to think that being from Difficult means that's proof that God has a sense of humor.
From our infrastructure project management team, which will be focused on our vertical portfolio, minus the capital projects, as well as our capital wastewater projects that we have programs for. And then we also have, as a supporting function, our deliver group, which really covers our major projects like the Convention Center, 16th Street Mall, and the like. That's led
16th Street
by our
Mall.
City engineer. And
oh, you're from Friendship Township. I love it. Yeah, I know your area well. Yep. No, I know.
On the operations administration, that's where you'll see our transportation.
Y'all close to the Mule Festival out in Columbia. We go there every year too.
Operations are formerly known as our street maintenance group. So think about
my aunt would lose her shit over that Mule Festival. She loves it.
Then we have our right-of-way services group. That's
everybody watching's like
review and permitting approval, and then right-of-way enforcement team. Those 4 functional areas make up our operations administration. Then on the far right, for utilities, we have our wastewater.
Yeah, so the thing to remember, guys,
so the maintenance of
this one matters for poor people because it impacts Chantel Lewis and the Department of Transportation and the RTD and the cuts that they're going to be facing. The big one, if you're going to do one of these and only one, please make it tomorrow. Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The budget hearing is the safety. You know who's the head of the chair of the safety committee? Cashman. In the afternoon at 1 o'clock, it's the Denver Sheriff presentation, followed by the Denver Fire Department presentation. Also going to be led by Cashman because that is connected to the safety committee. Tomorrow is the day we got to show up and holler outside the building if we can, during the meeting if possible, disrupting everything online. Oh gosh, it's my pleasure, y'all. It's my pleasure. Because Cashman, in case you haven't figured this out already, Cashman is not the person we want sharing the safety and police conversations.
As we put together this budget, we really took some time to understand what some of the risks were and other considerations that we want to leverage to understand how we can develop a sound budget that meets our department mission. And I'll just walk through some of these real quickly.
But see, so these are the risk considerations. Again, first screenshot here. My first question is, did you consider...
we started off at the year with single digits in our vacancy rates, which has been the lowest vacancy rate that we've seen in the past several years. We had about that
necessity versus usage statistics. So remember what Chantel Lewis said. So in the risk considerations, like really what is the risk? Why does this exist? So when it comes to something like public transportation, this was very much part of the flight with white people, the white flight into the suburbs, because who would need public transportation in theory back then when population was much less dense and the streets weren't as crowded? Poor people. Who needs city parks? Poor people, people who can't afford a backyard. That was very much how it was viewed. So that was how over time it went from a public shared space, really good idea that makes the city pleasant, to things that attract poor people. And why would we want those? We don't want poor people in our space. So
intellectual
that
capital was,
framework, with that
this
lens
is
in your
concerning
mind,
for us.
that is what a lot of people are thinking of when they hear these conversations. Because right now it's like, okay, we're in a global pandemic. We've got a lot of unhoused, a lot of poverty, and a lot of people who can't afford cars. Never mind the environment and the people who don't want to use cars because it's better for the environment, and they don't necessarily want to bike because that isn't always safer depending on where you are. Yeah, I want to know if any of that is factored into the equity. Are they taking necessity and projected economic impact district by district into consideration when deciding which lanes to cut, which lines to reduce, or is it just going to be an across the board slash, which then will lead to statistics that justify increased across the board slashes with no regard for which areas the need might be rising and which areas need has basically stagnated because no one uses it as a commuter train in the first place.
And maintaining overall service levels.
Does that make sense? We don't need to maintain all service levels. We don't. We need to determine demand. And demand is driven by necessity in the times of a pandemic. None of this looks to me like it's pandemic informed going into next year. We could shut down some lines completely and be just fine. And I did not see that on the table at the RTD meeting. Did you? Correct me if I'm wrong. Chantel Lewis, District B Director, didn't see that either, as she mentioned in the live stream we did after the budget meeting.
Business community and the general public as a whole. And so as we entertain more recommendations from some of the committees that have been set up to really help guide the city moving forward in a post-COVID world, that continues to put additional requirements and pressures on our staff to entertain other ways of doing business and entertain implementing new programs that can really satisfy the needs of our business and community and our general community at hand. And so as examples of that, we were a critical player in the patio expansion program, where we have over 400 or so restaurants that either have been in a position to expand out their places where they can patronize customers into the sidewalk or even particularly into the street. And there's certain instances where we close down streets completely to help support that program. And then also you see here as an example what we state as T-REX, which is an acronym that really is related to our recreational street program, which and it's our temporary recreational streets where we temporarily close streets, certain streets throughout the city and county of Denver through traffic. And there needed to be a lot of planning and design to go into that particular effort.
So to be really clear, one of the things that I'm always thinking about is that I live next to South High School. I love South High School. I can't wait for my kids to go there. It's a hell of a lot better than the high school I went to. One of the things that I like about it is that it's one of the only ESL programs in the Tri-County area. So students, and if you'll, with the conversation I like having with parents when they get all, well, I'm just really worried about choice and making the right choice for my baby because I don't know, I looked at that South High School, said it's got a 2 on greatschools.org. That's when I'm like, hey, math people, let's chat. When you strip out certain numbers, it goes up to an 8. What number is that? Standardized test scores. So if a school like South has the only ESL program in the Tri-County area and non-English speakers are bussed in to take these courses as well as the standardized test, and then are left wherever they are once their English is proficient enough that they're tested elsewhere, that's a constant stream of people that bring that number down. If you take those people out, again, which isn't hard to do if you download the data set, boom, it's a great school. So that is an anti-intellectual argument that I don't have a lot of patience for. What you're saying to me is, I just don't want my kids around brown people. F you. That's fine. I don't want brown kids around you. Go wherever it is you want to go. So if we're not thinking about these things when we're evaluating schools, and the government doesn't always, especially when it comes to South High School, is it thinking about the students that rely on public transportation either to get around Denver because buses don't serve their area? I don't think kids have been factored into this at all. How many kids use the bus system? We've got 2,000 unhomed students, most of which are probably not camping in front of their school, or even in the neighborhood where their school might be located.
With the additional
so I'm sure Tay Anderson has better things to do this morning, other things to do this morning, but this is why I'm going to be sitting here yelling out, what about the kids? This is a public service. It impacts people, and you need to think about those people before you dig into the numbers. Because what you're effectively saying when you get to the number is these people matter and these people don't.
And we're trending in a positive direction for our staff at this point. Next slide.
Safety metrics, don't get me started.
I mentioned before that we do not want to see our customer service metrics slip, and we continuously track the cases it takes for us to close and our first call resolution, as well as our open cases over 90 days. We have seen an intake in the last metric here, where we do have a goal of 200 cases not to be open more than 90 days, and we're continuing figuring out ways to fight this, to not let too many cases grow over a period of time.
Massive cuts, 20% cuts. Then, this is what I was streaming, not last night, but Wednesday night. So on Wednesday night, they proposed RTD budget was delivered to the board and discussed in what they call a study session, where they study the proposal, and the proposal sucks. It's terrible. It turns like what is a really good middle-class job into a shitty job, a really terrible job. No one would want to be working for the RTD. And frankly, they don't care. They're looking for justifications to shut it down. They're trying to not just cut, but gut public transportation in order to fund this police contract.
So, staff and the leadership will give it.
And that absolutely, and this is what we need to. So what RTD I did, it was a really short Q&A with Director B, Chantel Lewis, Director of District B, Chantel Lewis was kind enough to come and speak with me for a few minutes after the budget presentation and express some of her concerns, which I share and are absolutely reflected in what we're seeing right here. So the first lever we need to push is we got to push back hard on cuts to public transportation, because who's that going to impact the most? People without cars, people who don't have the luxury of working from home, people whose jobs include showing up physically, putting on a mask and performing manual labor, like cleaning out the rooms in the schools that our kids attend.
What we've put together as a proposed budget for you captures the spirit of addressing those challenges while mitigating some of the fiscal realities of the city. So one of the themes that you're going to hear throughout this presentation is about the preservation
They're eliminating
of programs and services that
the top layer. They're eliminating the bottom layer, and they're going to make salaried workers do a lot of the hourly worker work.
The mindset of making sure that we can continue to not only
this is what we call stuffing.
Most necessary
they're stuffing the salaries
continue to occur, but to continue to occur at the highest level possible. So we'll talk about.
They'll do it because they'll just be glad to have a job with benefits in a time like this. Is the justification?
Also,
it's not what they said. That's my interpretation.
The impacts to the residents
in order to save your job, we're going to have to cut people and make you work more. They're eliminating overtime, and that overtime will be passed on to salaried employees.
To really talking about how Dottie is working
it's awful.
To lean in.
It's really bad
with the rest of the city to help
it's
accelerate
like
the economy.
So bad that they should be ashamed.
To really accelerate that through the broader use of the Denver bond program, which you heard a little bit about yesterday. But while a lot of what we'll talk about is around how the fiscal challenges.
When you think about bonds, I want you to remember the people from Wall Street who came in and said, we're going to run this city just like a company, and then levered up the Denver public school system with a whole bunch of bonds and debt obligations with no cash flows to pay them because Tabor.
Not only to drive efficiencies
and no one understands it, so we can't undo it.
Transportation and infrastructure, but also to provide better touch points to all those who.
I mean, I understand it, and I will gladly break it down for y'all, but it's a lot to keep in your head because there's so many moving pieces trying to mess with us.
Not only helps address some of the COVID-19 social distancing and employee safety factors that we're very, very keen to keep at top of mind, but really make sure that provides.
And it's particularly egregious, right? So think of it this way. If you're only going to remember two numbers, make it these. DPD has 0 cuts. Public
We'll talk a
transportation
little
is
bit
going to have a
about internal
20% cut.
efficiencies and how
Does
some
that
of
seem
these
fair to you?
challenges and really
What
trying
is
to
that saying?
balance,
In a time when people
making
are going to be
budgetary
poor and have less
reductions and the
money,
realities
it's going to
of
get more
the revenue
dangerous.
picture,
So we need
but
less
how do we do
transportation
that?
for them to
And
get around and more
looking at
police.
internal efficiencies, reallocating staff.
It was
really trying to
discussed,
make sure
but
that
that's
we've
not
had a
enough.
very deliberative process to keep the
I mean, that's
programs
one of
and
the things that's going to
services out there
happen,
that are
but
needed, and really
what they need to
internalizing
be,
as much as possible
frankly,
and
people
cutting
at
back on those
people
things which
here
may
just
not
aren't
be
that well paid.
public-facing.
They're not compared to the private sector.
Certainly
They're
part
really,
of
really
that
not.
is
Not just fine.
cutting back
What I'm
and
saying is you're not going to get
postponing
someone
non-discretionary
on, we
expenses,
don't
which I'll
have that
talk
many
about further.
executives who are on like $250,000 of year
In
packages.
terms of an overview
Instead,
of
they
the
have sweet
general
deals like
fund, and then I'll
pensions
pull back
and
give you a picture
vacation days that are
for
bought
all of
back
the
if they're
funds
not
that
used, and
Dottie
sick days
has.
that are bought back
Really,
if they're not
we're
used.
talking
All of
about
that's
in
going away.
2020 this year, an appropriation of $147 million, and that, if those of you that are looking at the budget book, I'll say
I'm looking
that
at the budget book.
excludes
It's in
the
my
National
other.
Western Center, which is in Dottie's appropriation but managed by the mayor's office. Nonetheless, 147 million appropriation. Now, we do have reductions that this audience has heard about over the last few weeks in 2020. So we don't expect to spend 147 million this year, but that is the appropriation for this year. Next year, our recommendation to you is 127 million, or approximately a $20 million reduction overall to the general fund budget of Dottie, and we'll take you through those changes. At the top of the page, looking at resources from an FTE perspective, so slightly different than positions, but FTE, we are decreasing by about 93 positions from 1107, 1108 down to about 1014. A big piece of that are the employees that Euless mentioned who did take advantage of the SIP program. There were 44 employees for the department, a little bit less than that in the general fund because some of those were in wastewater. With that, a slide that some of you have seen in previous years, we've tried to give really a view here of what the department has looked like over time. So as opposed to just talking about incremental changes, positive or negative, this gives you a depiction of what the agency has spent going back to 2017 through what we expect to spend in 2020 and our recommendation to you for 2021. So as you can see, we've grown the general fund budget of Dottie from about 115 million in 2017 up to 147 million this year. The colorful stacked bar charts that you see is really to give you a picture of where that money is spent. We'll peel back the onion further and tell you what the money has been spent on as we go through this presentation. So the blue slides will be, the blue and this slide will be our project delivery. The purplish color is operations, utilities, and red, and really all of the support functions or executive director functions in the yellowish color there. We have showed in this slide in the 2020 column what the reduction actions have been that we've taken this year. So you'll see 12 million on the bottom of the 2020 graph. And really that's about $9.7 million in agency related reductions, as well as the impact of the furloughs that you've heard about. And that's about a little bit more than $2 million from a
Hello, Miss Katrina. I'm so happy to see you. This is
on the right-hand side of the page.
Lovely lady has a daughter in my my kid's class. Oh wait, we got 2 kids in the same class.
Spending for Dottie, not just the general fund.
They have not forgotten about
So
wanting a
year-over-year
sleepover, by the way. They are still asking, both of them.
And I'll focus on 2021. We're talking about 127 million, just as you see in the graph to the left for the general fund. Wastewater, our enterprise fund of about $133 million, and that does include bond and debt issuance for the enterprise fund as well. Our sidewalk repair program, our asphalt, as well as our composting special revenue funds, and you'll see the related personnel components that are broken down for each of those funds. With that, this is something that you'll start seeing a little bit more from us, really pulling back and showing what the dollars are spent on over time by the individual parts or divisions and administrations within our organization. So I'll make a couple brief notes here before getting into the meat of this. You'll see for project delivery, there's a fairly significant reduction year over year. I will say that part of this you heard from the Department of Finance from the city yesterday about the capitalization of staff related to certain capital programs and bond programs. So that's driving quite a bit of that, which I'll touch on in just a few minutes. Operations reducing quite significantly, and those are really reductions, and we're feeling that.
The one point I will say is that this is why debt is such a big deal. You got to service that debt obligation no matter what. So now we are locked by a city charter, stuck somewhere between these contract negotiations with the DPD and the bondholders. So we're owned by Wall Street and the DPD.
Which
basically
was funded through a transfer from NDCC and in part from DDPHE. So not a net new expense to the city, but a transfer from.
I want to hear how they define it. I see how it's defined in the blue book.
With that,
oh, they didn't.
Looking from an expense
awesome, Brad.
account or an expense category.
That's definitely more interesting than what we're having right here.
Overall, taking into consideration the appropriation change year over year, we're talking about a little more than $20 million. $12.3 million of that is coming out of personnel. That does include things such as the impact of SIP. It does include the impact of vacancy savings associated with keeping vacant positions open. It does also include things such as the capitalization of staff charges for bond and CIP that I alluded to a minute ago.
Good catch, Vinny.
The services and supplies.
This is why we have to be here.
There's reductions in a number of different areas, though also some 2020 costs that won't carry over into the next year. And we've also pared back certain items on the capital equipment side. And while this is general fund, I will say we've done the same thing for the wastewater enterprise fund. With that, sticking with the theme of really expanding the breadth and depth and peeling back the onion a bit, here's where you'll see how those $20 million have really occurred for each of the administrations and divisions within DOTI by the expense categories themselves. So I won't belabor this slide too much in the interest of time.
Yeah, so the executive director, that's the personnel, services and supplies, and informal services, which is basically the compensation packages.
Let me touch on a couple of the big ones. Agency-wide, CIP and staff charging about $4.9 million, $4.85 million. And that's the charging of really project managers' time as well as some back office staff such as accounting and contract administration to both Elevate Denver Bond and the CIP program. In terms of the special incentive program that we talked about, the net impact or reduction is about $2.2 million. I say net as that is the savings in compensation to the employees that Euless mentioned, as well as a portion of the payout to employees, which occurs in 2021. And I think, as you know, that payout is split.
I do not disagree with that, Katrina, and I think that's an excellent point.
That said, there are
I'm thinking that's what's coming out of executive, though, and that's what I'm waiting to hear. Like the external consultants that will be replacing executives to manage said projects.
That are more discretionary in nature. We do feel these expenses. They are things such as training and travel, dues, licenses, supplies. But
because if that fund is increasing, that would explain the increase. Well, we have fewer people now, so we need more consultants to do the work. Consultants, by the way, are not cheap. I know because my husband's
technology. We are protecting some of our very key investments to get technology in the hands of our operational staff in the interest of safety. But it does mean that more broadly for the department, we are not going to be replacing computers, laptops, printers, and the like this year.
Why would we want people working on transportation having any of that anyway?
Environments. And while DOTI does have about 70% of its staff that shows up in the field each and every day, for the third of our staff that are really working from home, there are savings related to not only facilities, but to the supplies that relate to employees being in the office. With that, we're going to turn it over to Todd Richardson, who's our Deputy Manager for Operations, but I'll give a brief note here for you that you're going to see a bit of a rinse and repeat approach here for each of our administrations. You'll see their budget. You'll see key metrics for that portion of the organization.
But that involves reading. Will Hines do any of it?
About some of the changes that have occurred within their organization specifically. I'll then rejoin you with Euless at the end, and we'll cover a little bit more after we talk about capital, about revenues as well as wastewater. So, Todd, if I could turn it over to you.
And Todd, before you start, I just want to I see Mayor Hancock has joined
But it
us.
comes
So
out a
Mayor,
different
welcome,
part of
and
the
I also want to
budget.
acknowledge Council Members Sandoval and Torres. And we are 30 minutes in, so Dottie, you have a max of 45 minutes left. So I just want to give you that time hack. Take it away, Todd.
All right, Seth, can you hear me and see me?
Yes, we can hear and see you.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Mayor Hancock, Madam President, Chair.
Oh, did Hancock show up
Herndon,
yet?
And honorable members of City Council and
Great.
City staff. My name is Todd Richardson, Deputy Manager of Operations. All right, today I'm going to give you a quick overview of the proposed 2021 budget and some challenges that we're going to be facing. Particularly on this slide, you can kind of see our org chart and the directors' names associated with the operate, maintain, regulate, and enforce. I really want to point out here our headwinds and challenges. Every year, snow removal is the challenge for us. This year, with the reductions in overtime and some of the hiring freezes, that is going to be even a bigger challenge.
Great.
I will talk about how we're going to try to mitigate some of that risk. But our specialty programs, protected bike lanes, residential snow program, are really.
I don't know about you, Katrina, but there were several days last year when they stopped plowing the streets by the school that made it impossible for us to get the kids to school. We had to walk in the snow on that ice that they wouldn't remove.
Develop reviews, permitting, and inspections. This is our right-of-way services team. I'm going to show you a slide
that was
here
pre-COVID.
where it's going to show that our construction
learning from
development
home.
has not slowed down in the city. And this is putting stress on that staff as SIPs and hiring freeze has affected that staff. Traffic signal and maintenance operations, overtime reductions, SIP, hiring freezes has affected the maintenance, our ability to maintain, and the conflict between emergency responses and daily maintenance. Elevated vacancy levels, we already touched on that. I won't go through that. You just pointed out on retirements over 1,000 years within Dottie. We are worried about that. The most significant SIPs happened in the operation division. So that knowledge walking out the door is worrisome to us. Also, we have a reduction in some of our sweeping level of service. So I will talk about that. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide, just as Seth pointed out, we're peeling back the onion a little bit more. You can see there on the right what the division spend. And in the top right-hand corner, it just kind of gives us the day-to-day operation and activities. Think of the folks that are out there putting the crosswalks in, fixing our signals, sweeping the streets, paving the streets, curb and gutter, writing the parking enforcement tickets. That's all operations. Seth talked about 70% of the folks in Dottie are in the field. That is mostly the operations team that is there out in the field. Our close to 500 employees, nearly 70% of those folks are out in the field every single day. As you can see, from 2019 to 2021, what we're recommending, there's about a $6 million overall drop in the budget. All right, thank you. Next slide, Seth. Okay, here's our KPIs. You'll see in the top left-hand corner our PCI. We're always trying to maintain a 75 PCI. I alluded to some reduction in lane miles. We're looking at a 10 to 15% reduction in lane miles, which could have an effect on our PCI, possibly a 0.5 or 0.75% or point drop there. Pothole response times. We're looking at trying to maintain a 3-day response time on potholes. You'll see 2018, 2019, there's some fluctuation there. That was a very heavy freeze thaw season. So we had some challenges there because there was such an increased number of potholes that year. But we're looking at the mark of 3 days. All right, bottom left, addressing. I really wanted to show here the effort that we have made with the challenges to embrace technology and with the residents and our customers embracing technology. You can see in 2017, 7% of our addressing transactions were online. Today, right now, 100% of those transactions are online. And just kind of give you an idea, there's somewhere between 14 to 20,000 transactions that happen in the addressing transaction. Here's what I talked about earlier: plan review and permitting and inspections. You can see from 2017 to 2020, we have increased nearly 10,000 of these transactions, which is a good indicator of the development and construction not slowing down. The white hash mark actually is where we're at right now today, year to date, and we predict to be around that 45,000 transactions in the plan review, permitting, and inspections. We'll talk a little bit more about 2021 when we get to the revenue portion of the presentation. Next slide. Okay, the next slide, the next couple of slides, I'm going to go over what the reductions are and really focus on what our challenges are and how we're going to mitigate those challenges. So you can see on this first slide, we have $1.4 million reduction, and that equals about 17 people in our street maintenance division. Just think about that. 17 people equals about 25,000 hours of labor annually. Okay, so this is where we talked about our paving being reduced. We're going to have to take the third paving crew and take those folks with that expertise and get our paving crew 1 and 2 up to the right staffing levels, because we're going to ask those first 2 paving crews to absorb some extra miles and help mitigate the impact on our PCI. We're also going to try to shift some of that paving work to the industry. There is a little bit of risk there where they can't do the same amounts, the capacity there for that industry, and it is more expensive. We're also going to reduce the amount of sweeping that we do in the central business district area. These decisions are difficult. We take pride in the way that the city looks, and we especially want our central business district to be clean. As it comes to snow removal, we are pulling from other departments.
We need our central business district to be clean, so they'll keep paying for
our snow removal
our
crews.
campaigns.
We're taking folks from our right-of-way enforcement, and we're pushing them to help do protected bike.
We don't want to do anything about the unhoused.
All
We
right,
just
on this
really
next
want to
slide
sweep
here,
them out of downtown, because
you're
clean
seeing
is
our
what
right-of-way
matters.
services and right-of-way enforcement teams minus 11 personnel. Our right-of-way enforcement team is probably best positioned in the city to maintain level of services. As we talked earlier, right-of-way services, if that
Vinny, if you're watching right now, go take a look at
that
something I just
team could be
retweeted from
stressed,
Chris Hines.
to maintain response
They're called
times for
police
plan reviews
brutality
and the like.
bonds.
Next slide.
They are very much
Okay,
viewed
FTE decrease
as
in our
attractive.
transportation
Why?
operations. That's 9 folks. These are
Because
the folks that repair our
it's like an
signals. This is what I was
insurance
talking about,
contract
the
that pays
between
out
emergency responses and
if you have
normal
police
day-to-day
brutality.
activities. With the stresses on
And
our overtime budget,
if the police department's really good and there are no payouts and the bonds don't fall, it'd be a really great way to keep police departments in line. They're terrible. They've been around for a decade.
Also, this will challenge our ability to build signals.
Basically, once you have them, they're not a deterrent.
Between 12, 10,
they
12,
are
15
a license
signals in-house. We may
to
only
kill.
have to do
And I want to make sure those stay off the table in Denver.
as we shift some of that work to our preventive maintenance.
Because the part of the budget that I am most interested in,
I really want to
of all
talk
this,
about the biggest impact
is the part that goes over the
It
payouts
could
that we have
affect
made,
our snow
excess force,
operations if we have
because
more
that
than
needs
our
to be
kind of
weighed against the
normal
police contract
snow events
going
per
forward.
year.
This
We're
is how much
programmed
we
for
paid
about
out,
24 events.
and that is going to come
If we
up
start
this year for
seeing
brutality, so that's coming out
a
your
lot
budget
more
for next
events, a
year.
lot
Do what
severe
you will.
events,
We
this
don't
will
do that.
impact that.
We make everybody else pay for it.
Right-of-way enforcement. This is pretty straightforward. Reduced citations, reduced cost to process those citations. In 2020, we have seen a reduced amount of citations. We expect
Take a look.
that to
Take a
continue in
look at this.
2021, and we also negotiated lower pricing with our new contract in 2020.
Take a look at this, guys. Where are they going to make up the
All right,
revenue?
here's the materials budget that we spoke about, that Seth spoke about. We actually had some really favorable pricing this year, so we were able to get our supplies up to 100% right now. So we're ready for the beginning of the snow season. As I pointed out, if we have a severe snow season, that material risk goes up. We also had, Seth pointed out, we had the ability to buy some technology, and so we can defer some of those costs in 2021 and not have to purchase those things. And we're also going to move some contracted services that we normally do outside the department. We're going to pull those back in and assign those to city staff. All right, thanks, Seth. I think I'm turning it over to Margaret right now.
Yep, thank you very much, Todd. I'll introduce Margaret Medellin, which is Euless mentioned, our Deputy Manager over our Utilities Administration. For utilities, what we're going to look at right now is primarily going to be associated with solid waste, that being the general fund portion of the utilities budget.
We're going to talk about y'all.
We have about 35 minutes left.
Okay, wonderful. Good morning, Mayor, Chair.
Let's
and
hear about
Council.
the
I'm Margaret
reductions
Medellin.
in trash
I serve as
collection.
a Deputy Manager for the Utilities Administration. On this slide, you can see our org chart, solid waste, wastewater, the Office of Green Infrastructure, and the Office of Strategic Analytics all reside in this administration. We have over 400 dedicated professionals that make sure our city is kept safe and clean and healthy by managing our waste collection, recycle, and composting programs, and keeping our sanitary and sewer systems flowing, and providing green infrastructure to enhance our watersheds. Just briefly, some of the challenges we've experienced over this year have included an increased waste tonnage. We've seen some periods of time where we were up to 30% over our normal collections due to the stay-at-home orders. We have also had to pull back on some of our sustainability programs and reduce some of the implementation of those programs. In addition to the other administrations, we've also had elevated vacancy levels. Right now, we're at about 22%. In addition to that, furloughs and retirements, and we also do have attrition. Let's go to the next slide. Just quickly, I want to show you a breakdown of our utilities budget. And as Seth mentioned, this is for solid waste. And as you can see from this breakup, the vast majority of our budget does go towards trash collection. Let's go to the next slide.
Thanks for the retweet, Vinny. People really need to see that about the police brutality.
I just want to go over a few metrics.
Either John Stewart, but I think it was John Oliver, did a bit on them.
Compost
let me see.
And recycle efforts. And as you can see, our compost program has increased. We've started to see a lot of traction.
Oh, wait, did I say graffiti? Okay, now, wait, sorry, I'm back in this.
Become embraced by the community, but we are anticipating a leveling off as we are having to pull back.
Anticipating less graffiti?
Some of the enhancements to our composting and recycling programs.
Somebody needs to tell the anarchists to take a look at their graffiti projection.
Our diversion rate, we do have a sustainability goal of 34%, and we are working towards that goal. Right now, we're estimating at 2020, we're going to come in at about a 25%. Let's go to the next slide. Just want to talk briefly about the changes that we've made in our administration to meet the budget cuts. So we really looked at how we could cut back some of our programs and delay the implementation of expansions. So we did rely heavily on freezing positions that would have gone towards enhancing these programs. That does mean that our teams are working very lean. But I do want to mention here that even through all the challenges of the last 6 months, our solid waste professionals have visited every house in Denver every week to make sure that trash collection, recycling, composting are completed. So, a big shout out to our team for doing that. And moving on, we also have reduced equipment here. So we have, in support of the pause in our composting program, we have reduced the amount of carts that we'll secure, and also our outreach efforts. And we've shifted some work from city staff, from consultants to city staff. So those were the main cuts. You can go to the next slide.
Yeah, thank you very much, Margaret. Much appreciated. I'd like to cover some of the support.
Here we go, Executive Director budget.
I'll catch us up here a little bit, Mr. Chair, and we'll get into project delivery and our capital investments, which I know you're anxious to hear about. With that, the overall executive director budget of about $37.1 million, as I alluded to earlier.
Here's a message I missed earlier. Did you guys know there's a homeless sweep right now? I just drove by Santa Fe and Evans underpasses with Denver Police and CDOT, Colorado Department of Transportation trucks conducting homeless sweeps.
Business engagement, but to the right of this page, you'll see really where funds are.
I honestly forgot about that. I forgot that
the ED office
Waste
itself, which
CDOT
really
coordinates with the police for these sweeps. I left that out of my projections. That means they cost more than 50 grand a pop, like I thought.
Within finance and administration, which includes all of the citywide warehousing logistics efforts, including our COVID-19 response and getting out emergency PPE, which we continue to manage.
Emergency PPD
supplies out not only to city agencies, but to the medical community as well. Our accounting teams, our fleet maintenance teams, which manage more than 2,000 vehicles across the city, not just for Dottie, but all of the city's vehicles, excluding the safety vehicles, and then some additional expenses, which I'll talk to in a minute. So with that, I won't spend a lot of additional time on this. This is the $1.5 million to create our OCBE, or Office of Community and Business Engagement, a transfer from the two other agencies that I alluded to. A reduction in fleet management, and this is really vacancy savings or holding positions vacant in fleet. Really, the way that we measure how fleet is being effective is really quite simple. It's what vehicles are available out there to all of the departments and agencies and offices across the city. We have a goal to remain at about 95, 96%. Based on open vacancies, we have dropped down to 94% as of today. We do feel that we can still remain over 90% as we head into next year, but it will be a challenge. In terms of maintenance supplies, we will pare back inventory levels. We will be much more of a just-in-time related inventory shop. So these are inventory expenses both in our fleet management team as well as our logistics and warehousing team. Fuel. The city spends no small amount on fuel every year, and while we continue to make very significant progress on the sustainability front, I think as this audience knows, the mayor has challenged us for 2020 to reach 200 EVs, or electric vehicles. We have not only electric vehicles in the fleet, but natural gas, and we continue to explore looking at other options to reduce the impact on the environment. But what you see here is for those vehicles that do utilize fuel, one of the impacts, as everyone here will know, when you go to the pump, fuel prices are lower. We do monitor this on a very regular and active basis. We do lock in prices on an annual basis.
Lower fuel prices, by the way, have driven every terrible economic policy in the past 20 years alone.
Or so $1,000. And then really just on the personnel side.
That is why.
And this is everything from your finance teams, your accounting teams, marketing, public information office, safety. Where we have open positions, we are going to leave those positions open in the support functions, really so that we can place the emphasis on those functions that really have to put services out there in the community. We'll also reduce a lot of expenses that we have associated with doing events. Maybe not so much community outreach as alluded, but other sorts of events that we have across the city. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie Thomas, our Deputy Manager of Project Delivery. She's going to take you through both the operating budget, but then really dovetail into the capital budget as well. Leslie?
Again, Leslie, once again, we're just under 30 minutes. And so I keep seeing org charts, and we could just breeze through those so we can get more to the numbers. Thank you.
Understood. Good morning, Council, Mayor, and Dottie team. We are the Project Delivery Administration. I'm the city engineer, and I lead the team. Our challenges really have to do with this upcoming budget in reducing delay and accelerating our bond program. We have seen some significant vacancy levels that are affecting our ability to do that. So you'll be seeing here how we are planning to leverage industry, both from a professional services and from a contracting services perspective, with an eye towards striving to continue to meet our aspirational goals for minority women and small business participation, and being a good partner by making sure we keep those payments coming in. So next slide. You can see here our budget. You can see the shift downward from 2020 to 2021, as Seth and the Department of Finance have shared with you. The capital budget will be augmenting us there, as well as staff charging. You can see our focus here in this general fund budget is pretty much on the transportation mobility focus and our project delivery. So think project delivery includes our project controls office, our support for special
I can't lie. My favorite
projects
part
like
about doing what I do right now is all the
Convention
texts that
Center
say "Good morning, Mom."
and Elevate.
They really
And
make me
that our
happy.
wastewater team is covered in the wastewater budget. So
I
next
just
slide.
wish they actually came in the morning and not like during
We have
the,
a performance,
live stream.
a scheduled performance index and a goal of keeping it at 90% on schedule for our.
But maybe this is when
projects.
people are waking
You
up,
can
and if
see
so,
here
you are
from
winning at life.
July,
That is
Our
cool.
workload climbed as well as our
Been up since
performance.
6 when the
But
kids
as
wanted
our
Muppet Babies and
vacancies
breakfast.
took a toll on us, you can see this trending down. The budget and the strategies proposed here will help us fill that gap and minimize the delay. So next slide. As we look at our reductions in the PDA budget, this reduction is really an agency-wide support of project delivery and the economic recovery. So we will be retaining 2 city planners who have been from grant funding, and they'll move to the general fund, and they focus mostly on transit. However,
We're talking about how they're going to be implemented across
operations.
So
team,
you heard
will
Mayor
create
Hancock say
this
less grass sweeping. We're also going to have
$155,000
less
savings in
snow
reduction. So next slide.
purging of the streets.
This is the largest reduction here for our division. It really
Good question. Nothing good.
moves the professional
The police,
services
that's
out
it.
of the general fund. It also reduces some of our space and lease needs.
If you go look at
and our
my
support
page,
for the TMAs. We have
I
communicated
reposted,
with
I
them so
retweeted
that
something
they
that Chris
can,
Hines said last night about
manage
police
their
brutality
2021
bonds.
budget.
This is a
We
big
do
deal.
value their support.
We need to be
and,
talking
look
about how
towards
much we
working
spend on
towards grant
payouts,
funding,
like you saw in
to support them.
Louisville, $12 million went to Breonna Taylor's
This
family.
team has been 100%
That comes from the
work
taxpayers.
home. So
That doesn't
we
come
have
from the
really,
police budget.
Really focused on those efficiencies, as well as leaning on other.
Wonder
grant
how much we paid
applications,
out
to fill the gaps
last year alone.
Next slide.
This year so far.
And then thanks, Leslie.
And why
If
isn't
we
that
could,
being
I
taken
think
out of the police
We're
budget?
going to bring Euless back just for a few minutes to.
And if it's
talk
not
about
coming out
some
of the
of
police
our
budget, how are we
equity
ensuring
commitments
it?
and investments,
My
and then
point
that'll
is,
dovetail directly into
we
our
might have already
budget.
issued these bonds.
Euless?
Yeah, so we'll go through this very quickly. So our equity definition for Dottie is really focused on areas, assets, and people.
Where
And we're
banks
really trying to
literally
take an
profit
management
from police
approach
activity.
to understanding how
They're not a
fair and
deterrent,
equitable our
though they are
investments on the
presented as
capital
such.
side as well as the maintenance side across the city and county of Denver. Next slide. And so how we're doing this is really leveraging a new implementation approach. You've heard about the One Bill strategy, and this is giving you a depiction of how we're taking a 5-year mobility implementation strategic approach, looking at all of our different assets, trying to layer those assets on top of each other, and then move forward to try to do as much work in the specific areas possible to minimize disruption for many of our communities. So we've seen already some savings in this particular effort, and we continue to reap the benefits of this.
Understand, I'm posting a link right now. This is the argument for police brutality bonds as posited in a daily mail out that goes to the finance world. Most people who read courts are graduate students or people who work in finance and just don't have time to go through the journal.
And we have taken that as a baseline to understand where our capital investments going throughout the city and county of Denver. And so the point of note here is that we do have a threshold that we have set that indicates which neighborhoods need the most help. And based off of this analysis, we've identified
but see,
about 54.
These bonds would only work if the payout, we don't need it. If it's coming from the general fund, those payouts need to come out of the police budget.
Provide some more details in terms of how we are
we can
moving
insure
towards,
ourselves against
contracting
a
on
terrible
construction
year of
professional
police
services side,
brutality
making
with
sure
the bond,
that those
but
particular
that's a stopgap,
are,
not a solution.
moving
And under our
towards how
current
we,
charter,
support small
if we were to
businesses,
issue
small
them, it would
businesses.
become the mainstay.
Next slide. And then lastly, we just wanted to show some additional content for you, and we'll make this available to you after the presentation. Since we're taking a asset-based approach to how we understand how our investments are equitable, we're looking at and developing asset scores for the 30 or so assets that we have throughout the city, and leveraging a GIS platform to understand which neighborhoods, in comparison to other neighborhoods, have a asset score that's respectable and one that we can use to help identify future investments moving forward. Next. I think
Great.
turn over you.
Thank you very much, Euless. I think we're going to bring Leslie Thomas back. And Leslie, if I can ask you to take us through our capital budget, please.
Happy to, Seth. This slide represents the key considerations that our Dottie team used as we submitted for the capital budget this year.
Now here
really focusing on
are the action items against police brutality bonds.
Commitments, projects that were already underway that needed gap financing, and really worked
I'm so
hard
tired of
to
hearing
look at
fiscally
the,
responsible. Fiscal
prioritizing
responsibility
equity, understanding
is
that we
been
could
used to
match
justify
capital requests with
a
the
lot of
staffing that we
nonsense that's
had,
anything
and
but.
really
And who's
assuring that
footing the
we're
bill?
aligning scopes with budgets. So next
You
slide.
and my husband. My company don't make any money yet.
This pie chart really shows the great investment that this budget allows in capital funding. It does include our wastewater capital, our debt service, our transportation
Debt service
maintenance, which is our capital maintenance. Key point here is the system enhancement for transportation, as well as continued work in our facilities. So this is the pie chart that was applied to the map that Euless showed. So for this, these are the highlights in transportation. Wanted to let you know that we've budgeted here at about 80% of the 2020 level, but compared when you add in the Elevate, we will be at $35 million in these types of investments in 2020. So next slide. As far as our key transportation enhancements, you can see we will be beginning our transportation strategic plan this year. We continue on with our bicycle program to get to 125 lane miles by 2023. Improved connectivity in North Denver through design and progression of those improvements, as well as medians and gateway. You can see as we'll continue to focus on our mobility and safety programs. And key shift here this year is
an asset is
$2 million
anything
in capital
basically that
support,
you've spent money on
management.
theoretically
Next
that brings value. So like these broadcasts, they cost me nothing, but they bring value. What do they cost? They cost my time. Okay, so one could argue this is asset or it isn't. Usually an asset is something that is physical and not a service. Okay, so then we talk about cutting services versus investing in assets. Assets are long-term capital expenditures like building the RTD, but once you build it, you got to maintain it. So every asset, like a house, right? You don't just own the house, you got to have furniture, and then you got to have upkeep. And then if there's hail, the roof's gone, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Kids break a window. So there's some insurance that you'll have to mitigate those ongoing costs of owning a house. And when we talk about assets, we're usually talking about those things that we invest in that incur additional expenses over time. Like, yeah, we've got this rail system, but we need operators, and then we have upkeep, then we have maintenance, and then it gets old and we got to fix it again, yada, yada, yada. Does that make sense?
According to our 6-year plan.
So here, for example, everything that helps with the sewage system under the city is part of the asset. So that's an asset that doesn't need a whole lot of upgrades over time. And it's an easy thing to cut until it's been cut for so many decades that now we're just like one bad storm away from flooding all the sewers. My
system
pleasure.
has.
So think
So
of this:
next
an
slide.
asset is something that is something that
Key
brings you
point
value
here is
and
this
costs
is
you
our,
money at the same
2021
time.
represents
Kind of
the
like
6th year of the wastewater
when
six-year
you buy
plan.
your
So
significant
this
other
slide gives you a
one of
highlight
these.
of the project
Worth it, but you're gonna be
progress
paying
to
for it.
as well as project
I was kidding. I
highlights
love
for
my husband.
storm, water quality, and
He's so cute.
sanitary projects that we'll be focusing on in 2021. So next slide.
So an asset is a property, but it can be other things
And
too.
thanks, Leslie. I think I'll take that if you'll allow me.
I think that
we've taken you through both
power,
operating
electricity,
our
and sewage
capital
and
budgets, and
maintenance
we'd like to pull
facilities,
back a
all
bit
of those are
and give you a
assets,
little bit of
because
texture
do you want to live in a
on
city
the
that doesn't
revenue,
have them?
the revenues that Dottie generates.
city
So
that
I'll try
doesn't
to
do
this
garbage
fairly
collection?
expeditiously.
So FYI,
You know,
we have
and
around
very
15
seriously,
minute warning.
these are public
Yes,
services
thank you, Chair.
are
We'll need that.
assets. They are
So for
treated
the
like
general fund
liabilities,
revenue
but this
for
is what
Dottie,
brings
you'll see
people
here
in.
that we
It's
are
clean.
down
There's no
in
garbage. Not
2020.
it's safe. There's
That is
extra
the top left
police.
of the page.
And that's kind of the
About
twisted argument that they make.
33%
I
goes
love it
for
here because we've got
the
all these
mayor and the
parks
city
that are very well
CFO
maintained,
about,
because they
both
pick
the
up the
impact
trash
on
regularly.
sales and other
Unlike
items. This
other places I've
particularly,
lived where
really
the Central
on the
Parks
Dottie side is much
had
more so around
garbage
our
that might or might not
right-of-way
be taken out. Some didn't even
enforcement,
have
as
trash
Todd
cans,
Richardson in operations
and there'd be
alluded to,
crap
we
all over the
haven't really
place.
felt that same
So
impact
this isn't
on,
everywhere, but this is
the
like,
right-of-way
90s
services
Eastern
side.
Europe,
Construction
certain
side
parts
is
of Asia.
fairly robust, but the
Shared, some
right-of-way
countries are better with
enforcement,
shared
certainly
spaces
our
than others.
parking activities
We
have seen
suck with
a
them.
sharp decline.
And which
You'll
is
really
basically
see
an
that
argument against having them
at the
in most
bottom
states.
left chart, where you'll see that dip, and then in 2021 we do expect to see overall about an 18% increase, but off that
Based
lower
off what?
revenue base.
Based off what?
So when you think about
Where's that coming from?
compliance
See, that is
enforcement
that
actions
18%
Dottie
projection is
manages
driving
for
every
right of-
number you're
for the
seeing
right of
here.
way,
And they don't
this
explain
is
it.
where you see in that blue line this year, of course, a very, very sharp dip. As
You'll
soon
hear me
as
say a lot when it comes to
COVID-19
finance,
came up, and part of
state
this
the
has been,
assumptions, and
as
we
this
should be
audience will
spending
know,
the first
policy
hour of every
decisions and,
conversation talking about the
turning
assumptions.
off meters,
All of this
suspending
rests on an
certain compliance
18%
actions, which
increase
have
in
since,
2021.
started
Really?
to pace
Why?
up.
You
So
just
we
said
do
yourself
see,
that services are expected to be
yes, there are
reduced
other
until
health
2026,
concerns
or at least the
that increase
RTD
next
did.
year,
I
and
know
as
that they're a
Freddie
separate
Hamlin alluded
entity
to,
with funding, but
previously,
how are
if
different
you
entities
were
providing the
not
same
expecting,
function
the city was not
operating on
expecting or
such
budgeting
vastly different
that there
assumptions
will
in
be,
one budget session?
something more significant, but if there is, then this
Correct.
could be a miss as well.
They're assuming we're going to bounce
On the
back in
right-of-way
21. I
services,
do not think that we are.
As alluded to previously, we have not seen
I've
that
already prepared my
decline
runners.
in
There's going to be no races
construction
next year. You
site-related
need to find a reason to
activity.
keep
For
doing
us,
this
that's
for
really
yourself once
around
the year gets better.
construction permitting, inspections, engineering reviews. But based on what's happened historically, and I'll allude to some of the labor
Lagging
US
construction
Bureau of
starts.
Labor
Gee, I wonder
statistics,
why.
when there's been
Lagging
recessionary
construction. Don't get me
activity,
started.
there really has been an impact to construction starts, anywhere between 9 to 12.
When your
or
revenue
nationally,
is
15
contingent
months. We've seen
upon
that a
more
little bit
being built,
shorter,
that is a bad
on the
revenue
front
model
range.
because
So
there
we
is an
are
end in sight.
expecting that there'll be a decline. We haven't
We're not
seen
shouldn't be
yet,
thinking
but for
about
the
revenue
purposes of
models. We should be thinking about
2021,
services.
based on what we've seen historically, we are projecting that there will be a decline.
And we should be looking at the cost of solving problems, like what we spend on police.
On parking meter revenue, and on the next page, I'll talk to parking lot revenue. This is where we've seen those declines as traffic seized up as part of COVID-19, and we turned off parking meters. There you saw in April and May, certainly no revenue at all, and that has since picked back up somewhat to the 75-ish% or so levels versus history. We do expect that that will pick up somewhat next year, and the corresponding parking lot revenue, which really tells the same story. So with that, recognizing the time, Mr. Chair, I'd like to briefly touch on the Wastewater Enterprise Fund. As I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, this is a significant part of Dottie's overall budget, and while not the general fund, nonetheless a significant portion of our operating budget. So in 2020, wastewater's operating budget was approximately $141.7 million. That will decrease to $133 million next year. As Leslie Thomas alluded to, part of this is not so much an overall net reduction, but we have shifted a number of dollars away out of operating into our capital funds related to capital maintenance activities. And what that really does is it brings alignment from a treatment perspective across how the rest of the city's capital programs are both accounted for and managed. So it's not a net decrease across operating and capital, but you will see that decline reflected here in the wastewater operating budget. At the top of the page, you'll see staffing has remained relatively consistent over the years. We have grown from about 322 staff back in 2018 up to 330 this year. We will pare that back just slightly next year. There are some employees that have taken advantage of the SIP program and will certainly hold some positions vacant. Before going a lot further, I would like to mention that the fund does remain healthy. We have not seen for the enterprise fund the same deterioration in fiscal conditions on the revenue side that the general fund has seen. And that should be probably somewhat expected, as these are your storm drainage and sanitary billings. And we do monitor these quite closely. We have not seen the same level of impact in terms of customers not being able to pay. But I will mention here, as you see revenues, that certainly this year we did take some actions in terms of trying to make sure that we made programs available to people if they were in need. We suspended any type of leaning activities this year and things along those lines. Overall, though, what you'll see here, 2020 versus 2021, is that we have a relatively flat budget. There is about the same in terms of customer activity, storm and sanitary, a little bit less in other areas. Part of this is our row S permitting on the wastewater side. Which
Mom, you're bullying the council members. Yes,
well,
it's called my civic duty. Calling them out is important. When you compliment Mayor Hancock and his handling of the police, it makes it harder to then turn around and ask him to stop doing it.
As you look at metrics for wastewater, I won't take a lot of time on this slide. I think the one thing that sticks out maybe aesthetically is down in the bottom left-hand corner where we do utility locates. And really that very large jump that you see in 2021 is expected as part of policy actions that have been taken at the state level, though we're well positioned to handle that. I alluded to at the beginning of the presentation, we have also looked at various consolidation efforts, and that includes how we handle locates across the city, where not only wastewater, but parks and recreation and others all have various locate activities. And we're really looking across city agencies to figure out how we can consolidate some of those activities and meet the policy requirements that are out there while not needing to adding staff to handle that. If we think about the expense side of wastewater, we do have about a $300,000 overall decrease. And while we are adding a little bit of staff to help augment, as Leslie alluded to, some of the capital related activities, that we have offset those decreases as well, in part through the savings of the SIP program. The wastewater building, this is not a reduction. You'll see this is a $1.2 million investment. And as we've taken this audience through before, we've been refurbishing the wastewater building, largely complete, or largely will be complete this year. This results in not an increase in the overall cost. We've remained within budget overall for that program, but $1.2 million will bleed into next year from a timing perspective, but no increase or no impact to the fund from the overall budget that you've seen previously. With that, in addition to the refurbishment of the building, there's also a bit of work that has done and is planning to be done on the roof to the tune of about $460,000. Primarily that relates to replacing the roof. And then
things like this
large number, again, this is what
are good expenditures. The things that we have to do to maintain our assets, right? A building with a leaky roof means everything inside it, from the people to the technology, is at risk.
Allocating those dollars into capital funds. Again, no net increase, no net decrease to the city overall, but moving those into capital funds, which brings us into parity with how capital maintenance funds are treated across the rest of the city. In terms of capital equipment, so not capital investment.
And this is the tough
out
thing.
in the
Capital
community, but
expenditures,
capital
this is
equipment
usually why bonds are
internally.
issued and we go
We
into
spent
debt.
quite a bit of
It's
time last year
to,
talking
it's
about
for a
an
big
investment
outlay
in
of
a
cash that we might
billing
not be able to
system,
save up
for
in a timely
wastewater,
manner
but that will also
that
be
will
used
bear
outside
immediate
of
returns.
wastewater. That
Unfortunately, in
investment
the
was made
20th
in
century, this is
2020,
usually meant
so that's a
automation.
one-time
So we're
investment
going to
that you
invest in
won't
this
see
software
naturally then in
and that will
2021,
allow us to
resulting
fire
in a
20
savings
people
year over year.
or
There are also some
restaff,
one-time
retrain
investments
20
being
people.
made
They
in
always
lab
get fired there. They
equipment
never
for
get retrained.
wastewater in terms of water quality
Because the
monitoring
whole
that
idea
we
of
done
working
last year
somewhere
also
for a
will
lifetime has
carry
gone the way of the
forward.
dodo bird.
With that, Mr. Chair, I think I might give us back 5 minutes if I did that right. So I'd
So
like to bring
I don't
back,
hate anything I
Euless to
hear.
close us out, if
I'm
I
not angry about any of this.
Thank you, Seth. And
I'm more
thank
angry
you,
about
Mr.
Chris
Chair,
Hines
and the rest of
tuning in to
council.
watch and
Appreciate you
thinking
being
that we didn't
patient
see him
with us
kissing
and-
Mayor Hancock's
and
butt
listening
yesterday and
to
trying to
a
call
lot
me
of
out on Twitter.
content.
Come at me. Like, yes, I will. Thank you. Been coming at
we'll
you.
just stop there and kind of open up the questions.
Lord.
Happy to
And I liked you, Chris Hines.
Thank you. And let me first say to Euless, Seth, Leslie,
Oh my gosh.
Margaret. I think
No,
that's
it's important. You guys need to
thank you all for all
understand
that
what
you
it
do.
is that we're
Sincerely
dismantling because the
appreciate it.
system
I
is
don't want
complicated
anyone
and
to
it's
believe
complex
by
for a reason.
pushing you
So
to
that
go through
they
the
can say that you're
presentation
uneducated and
as
stupid and
anything
don't matter.
counter
We know
to
it's
that.
best
I
for
just
you.
wanna make
The
sure that,
Republicans are going to do that
my
as well as the
colleagues have time
Democrats.
to
The Democrats
answer
have
the
a
questions
real
that they
problem
have. So I
with
just
it.
wanna say
It's called
as you say, thank
elitism
you for
and
all
they
that
are
you do each
unwilling
and
to
every
do
day.
anything about it,
Mayor
which is
Hancock,
why
I see you're in. I didn't
increasing
know if
numbers
you
of us are
wanted to offer any
independent,
comment before we get to
former
council
Democrats,
questions
which
for the
means
mayor.
we
I
are
just wanted
so
to
far
take
left
that
of
moment
left,
to
we
see
don't
if
like
you had
anything we
anything
see
you
on the
wanted to
right
add.
of us.
Mr. Chair, thank you. No, I really don't. We can go ahead and go.
And this is also why I got no time for anybody that is not talking to Hancock and the DPD and pushing back hard on this DPD contract. They are not taking anywhere near the cuts anybody else is. And I want to know why. And they need to know why that is not okay, because the foundation of all of these conversations is predicated on the assumption that the DPD contract will be accepted.
I'll use all 50. I'm just kidding. So, Director Clickley, as I said last year when we had these conversations, I want to be your best friend. Not kidding about that. I will send you cards. I've already sent you postcards. I'll send you more. I'm really committed to ensuring the success of Dottie and making sure that we can get around our city.
I hate him.
With cars and without cars. So thank you for echo our chair's comments.
How about the curbs, which are really difficult for people in wheelchairs to navigate?
I also want to thank you for your leadership in the shared streets.
Because when we talk about pedestrian friendly, we're not necessarily making them friendly to that differently abled.
Positive praise.
Yeah, me neither.
The only thing that we've heard is that perhaps the barriers could be reconfigured, or we could get a little more creative on how we ensure safety for everyone, including kids learning to ride bikes, which is stuff that's happening in our urban core. People haven't really had the opportunity to use streets for that before, and pedestrians and cyclists, as well as the people who need to get to and from their homes or their businesses using
correct.
I am also excited
and are going to be service less with cuts to the RTD, not in tandem with need for this public service or usage in a good year with this public service, which dependence might be increasing in a bad year. None of that, because we're going to rebound in 2021.
I see yesterday's slide that we have
RTD, by the way, is not predicting a rebound in 2021. It is predicting long-term effects, which makes me nervous. I don't know if y'all have seen between the traffic congestion and everything else. We don't need to be doing less with the RTD right now.
About things. Otherwise, I would love to have asked these before now.
I hate those bike lanes.
So we've got
they make traffic so much worse. They're so dangerous. I watch people get hit all the time. I cannot stand it. It makes my heart stop. I can't even drive on Broadway anymore. I won't do it unless I absolutely have no other choice. I watch people get hit too frequently.
Slide with points. And how does it fit into our strategy?
Biking is a culture that we have not fostered in the city. And it's going to be a transition to get people there, but still with no affordable housing, who's riding the bikes? It's, frankly, the privileged people. And that's what bothers me. They're not, and if I'm wrong, correct me.
Euless, are you there, Euless?
Everybody I know who bikes either doesn't have to go very far. They're not going from like Centennial to downtown.
So can you hear me?
They're not going from 5 Points to DTC.
Councilman Hines, I didn't catch the actual last part of the question. We have some internet connection issues here. All of the leadership is in the building today, so we apologize for some of the internet.
I'll see people above the poverty line using bike shares or scooter shares.
Do you want me to repeat the question?
Yeah, yes, please. Thank you.
Great. So I was showering you with praise. The question about the multimodal quality index, you teased it with the 5 points statistical neighborhood. I wanted to ask, is that ready for public consumption? And how does it fit into our strategy to move beyond single occupant vehicle transit?
Sure, and I appreciate the question. So we've been working very hard to come up with a methodology to actually establish a fundamental asset score that's consistent across all of our 30 or so asset classes. And so I would say it's in beta test form right now. We are looking at some neighborhoods to test out this methodology. We'll be happy to share with you and the rest of council what that looks like and how we're planning to use that score moving forward. So again, it's a very data intensive exercise, and we have been working very hard to try to build up the data points necessary to actually have a sound methodology and a clear cut score that's justifiable and defendable.
Imagine the people who have no other options because nothing else services their area.
Critical that we do it right.
And that's a number we need to be calculating too, but have not been. And if we're not maintaining the roads so that we can maintain the bus, so that the buses can keep their routes, then what are we doing?
Okay. Thank you for that. And I hope that we can have conversations between now and the next budget.
I've used RTD for a while.
Set that up for success
when I was pregnant and I didn't want to ride anywhere, or I didn't. But I also live in a part of town that has a lot of access.
I see that 4.8% of CIP is sidewalk and bike infrastructure improvement. We have mobility goals that include bike and pedestrian commuting. What percentage of our mobility goals are for bikes and pedestrians? Basically, does the 4.8%?
Yeah, my use of RTD has been a privilege, and I think that is probably what Coop is trying to say, that we're privileged, that we've never needed or relied solely on public transportation. Places like New York City, everyone does. There's a culture of it, and it's actually so efficient that it is not faster to have a car or drive, which is a real deterrent in a city with very little parking and little availability to. We can't make more roads there, and here it's getting just as locked in. They're going to have to get rid of street parking soon on some of these side streets in my neighborhood, at least. Like Grant is really narrow. The further south you go, it's hold your breath.
Still progress with building out that multimodal network.
So yeah, the times I've ridden it have been like, I'm a runner. I once upon a time had a company that trained runners. But one of my favorite things to do when I was getting to know Denver after we moved here and after I recovered from the birth of my second child, I would just take the RTD out to some stop just to see that part of town, and then try to find my way back. I would pack a little bottle of water and some snacks and my cell phone and put them in a backpack, and that would be my morning adventure. I would leave at like 6 a.m. and try to be back by like 10 a.m. Then I had a lot of fun, which does not mean I was running nonstop for 4 hours. That's like from the time I left the door till the time I came back. But I would pick a different stop from my station, which is Broadway, different lines, different distances, just ride until I saw something look pretty, and then try to run my way back. And I stand by it. I love it. That's something I've always done in every major urban area I've ever lived in. And that was how I got to know the town. And I love that I was able to do it here.
Councilman Hines, we got 7 council members in the queue. We've got about 40 minutes left. Councilman Cashman, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We need to change the city charter for one, which is Candace Baca is coming up. That was what she tried to put directly onto the agenda 4 weeks ago, and had the city council like trying to spank her like a little child for doing so. That was one of the ballot initiatives to change to the city charter. That's the biggest thing that needs to happen. And then once that is negotiated down, we need to go back and redistribute some of the wealth to revising all of the budgets that were revised down. So it's like, oh, actually, see, all these meetings have been happening all year long. So everybody's kind of already accepted that the DPD contract is what it is. And this is their last opportunity to change it during the sprint to the finish in November. Yeah, Boston's got a really good one too.
Hang on.
Correct. And the unions get blamed for it.
And I'll also throw out,
in my opinion, unfairly.
Oh, go ahead, Todd.
But people just don't like spending on infrastructure. They don't. And it's really hard to fund a public service that starts off as a luxury item but becomes a necessity upon which everyone relies. So New York is in between a kind of a rock and a hard place, and Boston is too, because they always underestimate the cost and the manpower required, because you can automate very little. When it comes to public transportation systems, you need humans driving the buses, humans fixing the buses, humans helping out when a person has a heart attack on the bus. There's very little when it comes to transportation that can be automated and streamlined beyond deployment of or creating of the schedule. And so that is what a lot of money is spent on capital investors that go nowhere to improve infrastructure, because the focus tends to be on efficiency. It's really easy to get bonds for efficiency, but infrastructure bonds are a totally different kettle of fish. It's almost something that a investment bank does to maintain a relationship with larger entities in the city and political figures, and it's a loss leader.
Focused on this as this is a key component to keeping our economy vibrant and keeping it moving forward. So our right-of-way services,
and they blame the unions for driving everything up, and we've been conditioned to hate unions most of our lives.
Okay.
So
is this
people who are busy and have other things to do other than get involved in get involved with civic engagement, they don't question.
I'm
because
sorry,
it matches that narrative in your head.
Going on with my voice or my sound here.
It's a lot of hypocrisy.
What I asked was, can you give me the reduction in FTEs on that?
Oh, for our right-of-way services staff.
Well, I mean, I'm just looking at a line item that's talking about a 14.5% reduction, and I'm trying to visualize what areas these inspectors are going to be reduced in. Is these building inspections? Are these going out and is this neighborhood inspection services? If you want to get back to me on that, that's just fine.
Absolutely, Councilman, and I apologize for the technical difficulties here. We'll get back to you on that.
It's actually quite interesting and effective sound. On page, I think it's 651, it talks about a $3.7 million reduction in trash collection. Same thing, trying to understand what
Not
that's
terrible.
actually
I'll give credit where credit's due.
To residents.
Yeah, and let me attempt that. And then Seth, you may want to jump in here. I think the reduction that you're saying might be just a hold on vacancies, and those FTE positions being reflected in that 10% reduction for that budget line item. But we can verify that. But I'm pretty sure that's probably what you're saying.
I would very much appreciate that. And another one, one of Leslie's slides showed $500,000 for safe routes to school. On page 647, it shows safe routes down from 550,000 to 200,000. If you could check that out and let me know what's going on.
And Councilman, if I may, Seth Runkle here, I did just want to maybe try to give you a bit of an answer to what you were asking previously to Todd. So when you were looking at, I think it was page 654 and seeing that 14% reduction around inspections and asking what that was for, that is a bit more around both holding vacant positions open. And that goes to Todd's comment around being able to meet existing levels And we do
Congratulations! Oh my gosh, that is wonderful. Where are you going to school?
on the
I love math.
construction,
Math makes me really
permitting,
happy,
and inspection side
obviously.
next year as construction
So
started in
all
Beaver
kinds of
Street,
things. What
start
interests
to
you?
happen. So we are expecting that there'll be a bit of a decline there. So it should
We
not
need
be
people,
a service
and this is
level
the
impact.
tough
However, if
part
we're fortunate
when it
enough
comes to
as a
applied
city
math is
to
that
really not see that
one,
decline in
it's smarty smart
construction
and
starts,
pretty. It's
we'll look
still
for
more
ways to make
theoretical
that
than what you're going to
investment
see in the real
people
world.
because there'll be the
So
revenue to support it.
working with
I
the
think
city
the other question that you were asking was related to
would probably demoralize you a
utilities
lot,
and
but
solid
we need
waste,
people on the inside
and
too.
it
We
was
really
in,
do.
I
I looked at you, Denver. That's so great. Yay, yay, yay. All right, all the good answers here today.
Really, that also
Hopefully you're
has
on a
to
full
do
fellowship
with,
and you're going to
some
graduate
of
with
the
no debt because those
programmatic
programs are
items
so
that
overpriced
Margaret
it's
was
become like
alluding
a
to around
just
not,
terrible.
not getting started with some of those programs that we
I
talked about,
love
revenue
it. I
generating
love it.
programs.
Well,
So, it's a decline when you look at the appropriation.
more
but
often
we
than
haven't
not,
started those
the thing that
programs
I would
this
focus
year.
on if
So
I
while
were you just in the
vacancies
last few
remain
months while you're
a bit
there,
challenging, as Margaret
because
had
you said you're
alluded
earning
to,
this
we
fall.
think that we'll be
So
able to keep
their
those
visual
levels of
data
service.
representation
Great.
is a
Thank you
really
for
big
that.
deal.
And
And
if you could
that's,
get back
so my
to me
husband's a
on
management consultant,
clarifying
but
the
he
safe
does,
routes to
he has
school
spent hours
situation.
and hours
The
in this
last
side
thing
course
is,
on visual data
you
representation,
know, one of these things that's
basically
relatively minor
wayfinding.
at
So
one
I'm going to type
level,
that in
but for
here.
the agency that's affected, it's important. in that,
Wayfinding is a new
I serve
field.
on the
Well, it's been around for about 10
Transportation
years, but most people never heard of it.
board,
Wayfind.
along with
The
several
very
of my
first thing that
colleagues.
I hired in my
And,
company
my
was a
understanding
wayfinder.
is the city has pulled
But
about
that was for my company
$35,000
is very,
worth
very
of funding to
different.
that
I'm
organization,
putting
which I'm
esoteric
guessing
ideas out there that
is
people are not
somewhere
familiar
in
with,
the Dottie
and I
budget.
need to take
And,
that these
I'm
esoteric
wondering
ideas
if I can get
and
clarification on
make them
that.
easy to grasp
If that
in a two-dimensional
does come
format
out
that
of
people can
Dottie,
look at, and that's
and,
what a wayfinder does.
you know, it
Those
seems to
heat
be
maps,
an
visual heat
important
maps that you've
piece,
seen like Ticketmaster and even
of the
Google Maps
Vision
showing
Zero
you
puzzle.
like that light up and show you where police crime is or where people
thank you for
live.
pointing that out. Leslie
That
Thomas had a
all
slide
of that was
like
created by a
about,
wayfinder. That entire system.
budgets, in terms
So,
of
and I
how
happen to know her.
paying
So, and I
members
train
of
her, and she
dues
works for me
for the
now, which
TMAs,
makes me really proud.
and so,
Not full
by
time,
that
unfortunately, it's
detail
volunteer
to
basis.
you,
But
that's-
I tell you
this
that
is
to tell you
probably
this:
one of the more
data
difficult decisions that we've
visualization
had
is
today.
huge. Understanding the
We
data that
respect
is
and
being
appreciate
visualized
the
is huge
partnership,
too. So
um,
when I talk, so like
feel in order to meet our budget
RTD, here's
reductions,
fun.
this was
Go
an
see,
outside
go talk
expense
to
that we feel
Chantel
that we
Lewis
may
and
have
say, I
another
would like to
opportunity
do
to support,
a visual
funding,
map
through
of
a partnership
demand
with some other entities
in Denver
going after
and how
grants
it's
and the like.
expected to rise in
And so we value the
2021
work,
in
especially
line
at
with
this time
my
where the department
predictions
is transitioning
for
to
economic
more
recovery.
multimodal
So instead of,
we want to rely
you know,
on those
we think
organizations,
usage of
but
the we're like, I
that
think
this
usage of
one
the
was
RTD
difficult
might be
for
up
us. And so
a
instead
lot
of picking and
in
choosing
certain
specific
areas,
TMAs,
working class
we made
areas who rely on it, where the students are, the families, the communities where families can mostly work from home, like Greenwood Village or, you know, Cherry Hills Village, Wash Park West, are going to be largely unaffected, but also don't have a whole lot of public transportation anyway. So take a look at the usage maps and the heat maps and somehow come up with what city council needs to be looking at. Create a couple of those. I promise you, if they go viral, people will find you and be like, how do I get this guy? I need that. Because anything that can make people understand a complex problem like that, that's where applied math can really come in. So think of it from a visual demonstration point of view. Show them your understanding with that. And then the right job is going to come grab you in by the face and drag you home.
Our TMAs and that funding, and the second one was about safe routes to school. I too would love to know just like some clarification on those numbers, because if,
did she get her lips done?
We are reducing the Safe Routes to School program to 200,000 this year. I think that's really concerning, given that we do have a lot of transportation concerns, particularly around our schools.
Is Kat Sawyer watching us?
Just one quick question, since I know that there are a lot of other council members in the queue and time is short. Clearly, if there's a single takeaway from the presentation today, it is that, you know, Dottie is going to struggle with reduction in staff and providing services to our city based on that reduction in staff in 2021. Given that, what can we do on a policy level to
Gosh, yeah, no,
help
this is not
support
derailing.
the
This is
Dottie staff in
enhancing.
that, right?
Everyone
And
right now,
so
what's going to
for
make the revolution
example,
happen is everyone saying, what can I
there's
do,
a
and
really
contributing
big,
rather than rushing
push
to do what everybody
reduce
else is already
our,
doing and replicating work that might not
residential speed
necessarily
limits to
be
20 miles an hour.
effective
Is
beyond that
something
moment.
that might be worthwhile to do, that would help achieve Vision Zero goals, recognizing that staff is reduced, right? Something like that. Would something like that be helpful to you, meaningful to the city to help achieve some of these goals, recognizing that we're going to be short-staffed in 2021? Thanks.
And I appreciate that question, Councilwoman Sawyer. We love to entertain kind of new policies and programs to make people get around much more safe. And so it's been unfortunate that we're in the posture that we're in.
So it's the text I just got. I will say with a high degree of certainty that the movement of money for cops to the special fund was to hide the money so Hancock could point to a newly passed police contract and say, look how much of this was saved, all while sticking a bunch of money for cops elsewhere. I agree with that.
And so what we've taken is an
guarantee that moving this money to a different fund was done at least partially from an optics perspective. Somebody just spoke up that probably shouldn't have.
So this is an ongoing effort. I know a lot of folks in a lot of our neighborhoods, as well as a lot of other stakeholders, really want us to take a look at reducing speed limits and other traffic calming types of approaches. And we're still working on that through our existing staff. But anything that is a large policy change or effort, we have to have the staff available to be able to implement it. So I guess long story short, we can continue the conversation and figure out what we can move forward with in a reasonable time here with our existing staff level.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sawyer. We got 5 colleagues in the queue. We've got just under 30 minutes. Councilwoman Torres, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Euless, I don't want to be nitpicky, but my numbers aren't lining up for, and maybe I missed it in the very beginning because I logged in a few minutes late. I've got 127 million from your presentation, but 128.3 million in the book. 1,014 personnel complement.
Thank you for pointing that tweet out to me, you guys.
1,367 in the book. Are those just misaligned?
If I may, I'll try that, Euless, and then I'll let you add in. So, yes, indeed, in the budget book, what you're also seeing is the appropriation for the National Western Center. So for Dottie's presentation, we've excluded that, but happy to give you the comparison of that.
No, that's fine. Thank you for that. I did notice an increase in the charges for services. What will that be due to?
Increase in charges for services on the general fund side, I think you're referring to.
Correct. Yeah, nearly $4 million increase.
Yes, thanks. Unfortunately, when you look at the 2019 to 2020, you'll see a precipitous decrease. So
true,
you will see that we do expect some rebounding, primarily related to those charges in 2021. Unfortunately, not to the previous historical levels.
Got it. That's really helpful. I'm interested in the Office of Community and Business Support. What would we expect to see from our council sides in terms of our engagement with that office or those personnel? And what are you expecting their deliverables to be to Dottie?
Absolutely, I appreciate the question. So this is a new group. We've absorbed them, I would say, over the past 6 to 8 months or so. This was staff formerly in the NDCC, which was focused on a specific area in the city. And we absorbed staff from DDPHE that was focused on safety and Vision Zero. So the whole idea of this group is to really be a conduit between our project managers, our engineers, and our planners, as well as our communication team, to do a better job in engaging the community on projects over a consistent period of time. And so we felt that there was value in the expertise that that staff at NDCC had to really go into the community and discuss with them the specific particulars on an individual project and use that model and spread it out across the entire city. And so what they will be focusing on is on major projects being supplemental engagement professionals that would help communicate what that project means, garner feedback, work with our planners and the engineers to really take that feedback and make these projects much better, figure out alternative ways to engage communities that we traditionally have had a difficult time having them participate in the public outreach process, and being really on the ground kind of ambassadors for the department and for individual projects. So it's kind of an extension of our planning and our design functions. It provides more consistency for our communities, and it's just leveraging folks that have been engaged in that work previously. The deliverables that I expect from them is really around community participation and engaging and tracking and engaging how well we are involving our underserved communities in a lot of our projects. There are also, we will be working on and presenting very shortly what are called community profiles, which is
I want to see those.
Led by that team, as well as a variety of different employees within the department.
You know, Jordan, you'd be surprised. So many of these are ignored and overlooked, and they love students. If you were to reach out and ask for the underlying data sets as part of a graduate school project and show interest, even don't tell them they don't need to know that your interest is in beating up on the mayor and the police, but rather take a look. I just want to take a look at the numbers in the process and see what I can come up with, and maybe this would benefit you. You'd have like a really nice, easy to read piece that you could show, and I don't need credit for it. I would just love to have the data so I can make that happen for you. You'd be surprised how many people would take you up on it. That is primarily how I obtained all kinds of information that I really should not have had my hands on when I was younger.
We're spending a lot
That's all I'm going to say about
developing those, and just
the gatekeepers getting a Hancock is not what you want to do.
Dottie's
the people you want to talk to are the people who walk
and kind of
who
feedback based on
can't
those
keep
plans that
eye contact with people because they're too busy trying to get close to Hancock. Those are the gatekeepers who know everything.
Reflective to kind of zoning and land
Go to the
use, but I
website.
feel like
It's not going to be someone this public facing.
in there that neighborhoods have said this is what we want to see.
It's going to be the person like you who has a graduate degree in the department, and you could do a search through LinkedIn, do a search through the website, find someone who's connected either through your networks somewhere, and you'll be able to get to somebody who might respond to you just on that basis alone and say, hi, I'm really interested in what you do. Could I have a few questions or a coffee chat? Maybe like I'm really interested in learning to see how I could use my degree to help the city.
Or the Office of Community and Business Engagement are Spanish speaking or fluent in another language?
So it's a great question. I know in OCBE, the community.
So I'm reading this right now that I saw on Facebook. I've been here in Denver 9 years. As an elder walking the streets, that's basically suicide. Parks don't have bathrooms. And when I can get to them, they're locked. Denver, where's all this money going? Our quality of life is decreasing. Quality of life is decreasing because public services are decreasing. That's what I was saying back in the beginning. That is our asset. Public services are an asset and need to be treated as such.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be very brief because I don't need answers right away. But on slides, I think it's 52 and 53, Euless and the team, I'd love to set up a appointment later to drill down a little more on the neighborhood asset equity data for my district especially, but to see how they integrate with the other districts. But more importantly, how does that drive our investments? The root of the inverted L begins in my district, so I'm very interested in how we leverage that data to direct our investments into those areas versus other projects in outside of those high inequity areas. And I guess I could set that up through Jason. Would that be appropriate?
Yes, absolutely. We'll be
cool.
happy to share
Thank
this
you.
information with you.
Excellent. Okay, and the only other
I appreciate that.
observation I would make,
because we need to think about like where the need is. Which parts of town have the worst roads? Which parts of town have the worst sidewalks? Which parts of town are completely inaccessible both to pedestrians and to the differently abled, a person with a wheelchair or a young woman pushing a stroller or a person pushing someone with cerebral palsy in their scooter, like one of my friends has to do with her brother. So what part of town is treacherous from them? Where can they not go? What's inaccessible or unnavigable to them? Start there. People move to large cities looking for the walkability factor.
Councilwoman Black, you're up.
Let me find that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all of the executive team at Public Works and everyone who works at Public Works. But I want to acknowledge the two people I talk to the most at Public Works. I'm sorry, Dottie, Jason Gallardo, and Ashley Graves.
A city's walking score is a big deal because millennials can't afford houses or cars because they've inherited an economy that's terrible. And so the walkability score is huge. Also, for me with 4 kids, I care about walking to parks and stuff because getting in a car and trying to drive anywhere is a pain in the butt. So the walkability score is a really big thing because that drives housing prices and home values.
City for community engagement and how they might overlap.
What parts of the town have terrible walkability scores? Start there. Don't start at the top with the best ones. Flip it upside down. That's where the need is. And that's what's being overlooked. That's where home prices are deteriorating. Which means that soon they'll become development zones. As developers come in and say, we're going to revitalize the area. But if in order to do that, you're going to have to spend some money making the infrastructure to get here better.
Traditionally, we have been the city's builder. And we're
like all those businesses in the 16th Street Mall Association that told Mayor Hancock absolutely no last night. So he canceled the safe outdoor space that they've been talking about near Curtis Park.
Effective way of engaging communities.
Development, economic development gives power to individuals over an area, and they have way too much control. So that's what we're going to be moving into in this portion in the afternoon at 1 p.m. So this is going to keep talking, then answer some questions. And then this afternoon, we're going to come back for the economic development opportunity as well as public health and environment. So economic development and opportunity is the developers and the land use, and that's going to be, and that's chaired by Flynn. So his people will be presenting that budget first, and followed by Cashman, who will then introduce public health and environment. Think about that. Paul Cashman, who leads the DPD, is also head of the negotiations, everything regarding public health and the environment. Is that the person you want heading up those two committees in particular? All you need to know about him is that he loves the police. Where do you think he stands on those two issues? Then tomorrow is the day-long extravaganza of the Department of Safety, led by Cashman in the morning, and the Denver Sheriff and Fire and Police in the afternoon, again led by Cashman. It's the Cashman Show.
Because Councilwoman Torres mentioned this, the neighborhood planning initiative, and for the average or the regular resident of Denver, they don't kind of silo our agencies, and so for them, community
it's not free stuff. We're not giving anybody free stuff. Sorry, just getting some tweets. We're not giving anybody free stuff, right? We paid for it. We paid for it. I am happy to pay with my tax dollars, my husband's hard-earned money, the money that on my investment portfolio from the job I retired from. I'm happy for the proceeds of that money to go towards keeping the unhoused off of the streets. I know I'm not some bleeding heart liberal that's like, just give them everything they want, buy them a rib dinner every time they want it. What I'm saying is it is absolutely a public health hazard. They know it and we know it, but we're not doing anything about it. Those sweeps are a waste of money and they're completely ineffective. So if you can't control it, then you got to contain it. And that is the heart of all public policy. If you get a graduate degree, take any graduate courses in public policy, or especially in public health, you've got to contain or control. If you can't control, you must contain, because that's your duty to society. That's why needle exchanges, we can't control drug addiction, but we can contain it. We can contain the fallout from it. And anyone who doesn't believe in that, I didn't believe in it before. I was kind of like, well, I don't know. Is that incentivizing users to keep using instead of trying to work on the underlying issues? And then needles were found outside my kids' elementary school in the middle of the night. Kids were playing with them. That became like a huge thing. And I'm like, I get it now. I get it now.
Indeed, that is
control or contain.
Staff for the Office of Community
if we can't control it, then we got to admit it and contain it.
And DDPHE. but historically Public Works, now Gotti, had a few controls or cost centers that had support.
Yeah, thank you guys for checking out the website. I appreciate it. I'm a running coach, not a life coach, but in a former life,
NDCC,
running was what I did to keep my stress levels down from a life in global finance, amongst other things.
It's not dedicated to NDCC anymore.
Okay, so when you change that in the budget book line, could you email my office so I know what that money is being directed to, since it's not NDCC? So that's a bit confusing because it's not much, but it is substantial.
It's essential. Correct.
And then I have one other question.
Is it though?
So, Eunice, we changed the large item pickup. It was changed during the pandemic.
It was.
It went, I can't remember if it went from every 4 weeks or every 6 weeks to every 8 weeks. I know it's
correct. 4 weeks to 8 weeks.
And I've gotten tons of complaints in my community. On one of your slides, you said the amount of trash has gone up because we're all at home, so we're not in our offices. Can you explain to us, so it's on the record, how that decision was made? Because the large item pickup every 8 weeks.
I'll give her credit. I like this question a lot.
Neighborhood, and the amount of for the expenditure for trash has gone down. So can you just tell me how all of that's working together?
Sure. And actually, I'll have Margaret Medellin give the details there. This was an assessment based off of core staffing levels, and we're trying to still maintain the highest quality level of service as possible. At the same time, where we're experiencing a high vacancy rate within our operators, and so it's kind of a load balancing type of exercise that we had to entertain during that particular time. So, but Margaret, you may have some more details that you can share with council.
Sure. For a little more context, so we did see the tonnage go up, and in particular for the extra trash collection. So what we were seeing is our routes were taking longer because we had such higher tonnage. So we reduced that service from every 4 weeks to every 8 weeks. And what that allowed us to do was to focus on smaller routes each day so that we could provide more thorough service. So we're still picking up the large items. It's just we were seeing every route having much increased tonnage. So in order to really meet those routes, we needed to break them down into smaller sections every day.
Okay. Well, just to our point in the mayor's letter on page 6, one of the questions that's asked is how will this spending cut impact traditionally underserved communities? So as we see people at home with the stay-at-home order, I know all of you all know this, but some of my communities that are underserved and have parents who are at home and working, playing dual roles. I just want to make sure that as we recover from this pandemic, that we hopefully maybe we can go back to picking that up, because one of the complaints is trash, it leads to other things. We don't have to go deep into that. I'm sure we all know that. But it would just be that nice if once we can commit to when we're recovering from the pandemic, if we can go back to that as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman Sandoval. We've got 3 colleagues in the queue, just under 15 minutes. Councilwoman Kaniche, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So
thanks to the team. I guess I'm struggling. I know a couple have mentioned this, the crosswalk sometimes between the PowerPoint to the budget book. And I guess 2 questions. One is, I know we have a lot of mobility and transportation stakeholders out there that are struggling to understand the budget, and they're watching now and they're emailing us. And I guess I want to just first ask if the department would be willing to spend time, whether those are members of the advisory committees in the city or those stakeholders, just to be able to sit down and talk with them about the mobility and transportation stuff in more detail. We had very little time in this broad overview to dive into that topic, which has been a council priority. So is that something y'all would be willing to do?
Absolutely, when it's appropriate. We're part of the city's budget, so as long as we're not in conflict with the overall budget process and what we share, that's fine. But
well, this is all public information now, so they just, I think, being able to understand it. And then in the budget book, and especially in the transportation section, 652, et cetera, it uses the acronym PDA, Transportation Plan, PDA. I know about an STP, the Strategic Transportation Plan. I don't know what the PDA is.
So PDA is an acronym for Project Delivery Administration. The STP, the Strategic Transportation Plan, is being done by the Transportation Planning Group in the Project Delivery Administration. So that's why it's referenced like that.
All right, because you know there's not a line item for the STP. So there are some places where I see mismatches, and I guess this theme of someone out earlier asked it, but you know we want to accelerate the capital investments. You've got funding in here for, you know, I think it was 80% funding for like bike and ped and some of that, plus advancing some bond. But like, for example, I see that there's an expenditure in here in the planning department for $600,000 goes to zero for bikes and pedestrians. So we zero out the planning dollars for bikes and pedestrians, and we also zero out the FTEs. Now, I know you're capitalizing some planning positions. Is that the case with the bike and ped planners?
Yeah, and that's something that we probably need to reconcile if it's reflecting like that in the budget book.
It's showing zero FTE and $0 for bikes and peds in transportation and mobility planning, which, I mean, we could possibly use any capital dollars if we don't have the planning team preparing for the use of those dollars. So I just, you know, maybe you're moving them onto the bond or the CIP budget, but it, you know, I think that's an example of where I'm not sure that I'm seeing a lineup between the planning staff you're going to need, particularly on things that aren't discrete projects, right? It's like bike lanes and, you know, it's not like the same thing as like you have 8 planners working on the National Western Center or on, you know, a big capital vertical project. We need just general planners that get ready and manage all the weird tree right of way and irrigation and all that stuff that comes up in these bike and peds. So that I'll just be, as a theme generally, I need a better understanding that we have the planning staff on the bike, ped, mobility, transit stuff to then match the capital dollars and where those are. And then you can get back to me. And then in terms of transit specifically, bus lanes, you know, I don't, you know, there's not, I searched for the word bus lane or bus and dedicated bus lanes. Are we still engaging? I know some of these things were being led by RTD, but we were doing our own work to implement the transit plan that Councilman Flynn and I represented the council on. And I'm just wondering if there were dollars in last year's budget that are being eliminated. I can't seem to find it where I would see what we were spending on dedicated bus lane planning.
Yeah, and that is probably a sub-line item in one of the program areas that we have dedicated towards transit. And so
and that gets zeroed out as well. Transit goes from 4 FTE to 0. Yeah. Transit also goes from, you know, 500,000 to 0. So that's it. So if it's in there, it's also missing.
Okay. All right, we'll reconcile this because you know, we're not losing staff. We have planners that will continue to go on, and we actually have transit planners as well that are advancing, you know, the Denver Moves Transit Plan and the phase 2 of that, and as well as kind of the next corridors we're going to be looking at in terms of planning and designing for bus lanes and major transit capital projects as well, such as BRT and the like. So we'll make sure we'll reconcile that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question is about revenue. You know, I realize it's a really sensitive topic, and there's a good reason why we've slowed down implementation of some things that might be really sensitive for folks who are struggling economically right now. You've all been very clear in describing one sector that's not struggling right now, and that's the construction and development sector. When this pandemic hit, we were increasingly aware how very behind the market we were in terms of charges for like the right-of-way access that those projects, you know, pay for permits on, and, you know, how much they pay to have a roll-off in the right-of-way and some of those costs. And I just was curious, are you proposing any fee increases to right size those things to the market, and or are we still studying that? Because I do think that while
I recognize we want to be sensitive about charging folks where we're way behind market and people are using our staff time to do process these things, and they're not actually even compensating us for the time that you all are spending. Now is the time we need to be really assertive about making sure that the users of our system are paying appropriately for the services they get from the department. That's the idea of these fees, is to cover the costs. So I'm just curious where we're at with that.
So appreciate the question, and we definitely agree that we are under market in a lot of our fees around permits and other uses of the right of way. We are still moving forward with doing the proper analysis. It's just about timing and that level of outreach that we need to engage the impacted industries if we're planning to make a change. But I mean, publicly stated, yes, this is something that we really need to reevaluate and move forward with when the time is right.
Yeah, I guess my comment will be, I think it's important to expedite it. We can't, something that is, in the city and the condition we're in, it's not fair for other user groups to subsidize the staff time, or for the taxpayers to subsidize the staff time that can and should and was originally intended to be recovered through those fees. So I'm a little nervous about your wording about timing. My advocacy would be, we have to expedite that and be charging appropriately for the cost of delivering these services. And I would say it's more important to do it faster than it was before. This is not, in my opinion, a wait till the pandemic's over situation, given the city's financial conditions. We have to charge for what our time is worth. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Kniech. All right, we're getting close. We've got 6 minutes left, 3 members in the queue. Council President Gilmore, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't require an answer. If I could just get answers back, that would be great. Ulyss and your team, thank you. And especially thank you for undertaking the equity index. My first question is, could DOTI be a department that does traffic enforcement instead of our police? In looking at the call data, District 11 specifically is last in citizen-initiated calls. So our citizens aren't necessarily calling the police, but we're 7th for officer-initiated. And if you recall, I brought this up at the last budget hearing last year, that at Silverman Park, police traffic enforcement gave out 500 plus tickets on one weekend in 2019. And so I would like to know how DOTI and DPD and our Office on Social Justice
Everybody listen.
and Equity are
Come back
working
in.
together to share data and figure out ways to not enforce people, but put the proper infrastructure into neighborhoods. And so that's the first question. Second question, the equity part of your decision-making process, it ties into what I just said. How does that go forward to creating safety infrastructure in neighborhoods, especially in historically communities of color? And then my second set of questions are around trash. We've talked a lot about it, but I'd like to understand a little bit more with the reduction in funds. How are we continuing to do outreach and education, maybe with nonprofit community partners, to keep sustainability at the forefront as we're seeing more issues with climate change and the negative effects? I think that sustainability, education, and outreach is very important. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. All right, Councilwoman Ortega, you got 3 minutes. Take it away.
Thank you. And I'm just going to plow through a list, but I first want to say thank you for the org chart. I think that's extremely helpful, and I want to ask to extend our appreciation to everybody on the DOTI team, especially the 70% that are working in the field. We have staff people from council that are tracking our questions, so if I don't get to all of them, I will be submitting them to Emily and make sure they get to you guys, but I want to cover a couple highlights. So number one, you all received a letter from 3 of us on council asking for a complete cost breakout on the Platte to Park Hill. Have received nothing in response to that from either you guys or Parks and Rec or our budget office. So Just want to make sure that's on your radar to get those answers to us. And to some degree, that's tied to some of the questions that came up Monday night about the on-call contracts and the lack of accountability, transparency, and what we get to see once we approve those. And, you know, tied to that is concerns about whether or not you all have a professional construction management team within Dottie that can manage all of these projects as opposed to contracting them out. Because when they're CMGC contracts, basically, you know, they can scope creep and, you know, add to the cost, do change orders, and we lose that control. But if we had our own internal, as we historically did within our Public Works Department, it ensures that we are managing the spend and not allowing the projects, especially in our bond projects, to exceed the cost of what was approved. I can go through just a couple quick more, and then I'll get my list over to Emily. Equity goals need to be set on these big projects. We're no longer in a pilot, so we need to exceed the 15% to ensure that we've got that workforce commitment to local hire. CPI on the wastewater, I want to know what that is for 2021. It's my understanding that as part of the PUP approval of the 300 million, it locked in an annual CPI. So I want to know what that is and what that increase is going to look like in wastewater fees. Project paving, I just want to know what the cost per lane mile is. What is that average cost so that we have consistency in what we are expecting to be paying when we do contract these services out. I'll stop there because Council President, I know you probably want to do some closing comments, or Council Chair. And I'll get this list over to Emily. I've got a few more on here, but appreciate all the work that you and our team at Dottie do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Ortega. And I appreciate you, your team, all the presenters, and my colleagues. We're just at the 11:30. I did have questions, and I won't talk to them now. I'll follow up later, but I want to echo Council President Gilmore's comments about sustainability. More people at home, more trash building up. I recognize the challenges with recycling and composting, but I just want to push back a little. Like, this is the time where we need to educate people about it, because there's more tonnage that will be going into the landfills because of the COVID crisis. And if we can just somehow try to find a solution as opposed to just minimizing or stopping our solid waste master plan, I would love to have a little bit more conversations about that. We are at 11:30. Colleagues, our next presentation is 1 p.m. with the Department of Economic Development and Opportunity. Council President Gilmore, did you have any final comments? None? All right, wonderful. Hey, thank you all so much. Mayor, did you have anything you wanted to add, Mayor?
Oh, hi, Mayor.
Just want to let you know I was still here, and I'll see you all at 1.
Okay, once again, Ulysses, to all of your team, thank you so much for all that you all do. Sincerely, thank you. All right, this budget hearing, we are adjourned.
All right, give me just 1 second, y'all, and I will give you a piece of my mind. Oh, as I try to get this going. Freaking technology. All right, so the key things to remember right here are, we got problems. We got big problems. Everyone in all of the agencies are predicating their budgets upon DPD getting exactly what it wants. And that's not okay. This is not a foregone conclusion. We can change the course of this, but we got to stay engaged and we got to keep pressing, and we've got to know exactly which buttons need to be pressed. So this afternoon, we got economic development and opportunity. That's Flynn. And that is the last thing that we need, is him driving this discussion. So we'll see what he's throwing out there and what he's suggesting. And we're going to look at the money that they're all trying to hide, that they can eventually then turn around and pay to the DPD later. And that was why, in my opinion, Gilmore's question was essential. I want to know where their security funds are coming from, which pockets are being shared. So I'm going to use the restroom and go have lunch myself and maybe do some work. That's awesome. So we will see you guys a little bit later.